The night air trembled with fire. Smoke curled above endless cane fields, turning the moon into a dying ember. In the distance, drums throbbed like a heartbeat, quickening, relentless. Chains rattled against bare wrists as shadows moved between the flames. Screams rose, cut short, swallowed by the roar of burning stalks. The ground smelled of sugar and blood, sweet and sickening. Somewhere a lullaby drifted through the chaos, soft, cracked, trembling. It was January 1811, the night when fire answered fire. The night the fields became an inferno. The night history chose not to forget. The Mississippi rolled heavy and slow beneath the winter sky, its waters carrying fortunes north while misery rotted along its banks. On both sides of the river stretched fields of cane, tall as men, sharp as knives. The air was thick with molasses, sweat, and the faint iron tang of blood. Samuel Hayes rode his horse along the muddy path, boots polished but already stained with yesterday's dust. His whip dangled loosely at his side, slapping against his thigh in rhythm with the horse's hooves. He had a thin smile, the kind that never reached his eyes. "Keep them moving," he muttered, watching a line of men bend their backs in the field. Slower than cattle and twice as stubborn. One of the men stumbled, clutching his side. Hayes's smile twitched. "Up!" he barked, leaning from the saddle. "Up before I carve the laziness out of you." The man rose without a word, eyes downcast. Hayes tapped his boot against the stirrup, satisfied. From the quarters nearby drifted a different sound, low, melodic, trembling like a thread pulled too thin. It was Eliza's song. She stood bent over a basin of water, her hands raw and cracked from lye soap. A washerwoman by task, a keeper of memories by instinct, she sang the same lullaby her mother had hummed on the voyage from Africa. "Sleep, little one, though chains may rattle. Sleep, though fire may burn." The children listened silently, wide-eyed as if the song could keep them whole in a world determined to break them. Hayes dismounted, walking past the quarters. He paused, listening. "You'll sour their heads with that moaning," he sneered. Eliza kept scrubbing, her voice steady. "It's only a song." "A dangerous one," Hayes replied, tugging at his gloves. "Best you remember that." He walked on, but the echo of the lullaby clung to him like smoke. At the big house on the hill, the shutters were drawn tight. The planter's family dined on imported wine, porcelain clinking against silver. Their laughter carried faintly through the night air, drifting down to where the quarters stood in silence. A boy no older than 10, barefoot and restless, whispered to his sister, "Do you think they ever hear us?" Eliza answered for her, her voice soft but sharp as cane. "They hear, they just don't listen." The fire in the hearth at the great house glowed, while in the cabins fire meant only smoke, coughs, and hunger. The difference between master and slave was measured not in miles but in breaths. The Mississippi flowed on, steady, indifferent, carrying sugar and rum to faraway cities. But along its banks whispers gathered in the cane rows, whispers of Haiti, whispers of freedom, whispers that would soon catch like a spark. And in the fields, Samuel Hayes twirled his whip idly, while Eliza's lullaby refused to fade. The world was quiet, but beneath the silence, something was stirring. The cane fields whispered with the sound of knives cutting stalks, sweat mixed with soil, dripping into the earth like an unspoken offering. Charles Deslandes moved among the rows, his pace calm, his eyes sharp. He carried himself differently from the others, straighter, quieter, as though the burden on his shoulders weighed less because his mind was elsewhere. Born of a white planter and an enslaved woman, he had been given the role of driver, a man forced to command his own people with the master's lash. But in his hand, the whip rarely cracked. Instead, a small knife was tucked inside his boot, its worn handle the only gift his father had left behind. "Charles," a voice called. Jacques stepped out from the row, muscles gleaming with sweat, the sun tracing the scar that ran jagged across his cheek. He was broad as an ox, with hands that could splinter cane stalks as if they were twigs. His laughter came easy, but his silence was heavier than stone. "You're thinking again," Jacques said, leaning on his machete. Charles glanced at him, half a smile tugging his lips. "I always am," Jacques shook his head. "One day those thoughts will get you killed." "Or free," Charles answered. The two men shared a look, long and unspoken. From the quarters nearby, a baby's cry rose against the drone of cicadas. Henriette emerged, her shawl slipping from one shoulder as she rocked her child close. She had eyes that burned with a quiet defiance, daring anyone to extinguish the light within them. Her voice, low and soft, wrapped her child in the same lullaby Eliza once hummed. Words reshaped, sharper now, less a comfort and more a promise. Hush, little one, the night will come. And with it, fire. Charles watched her, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. Jacques lowered his voice. She sings like the field is listening. Maybe it is, Charles replied. Henriette caught them staring and walked closer. You men speak of work, but your eyes speak of war. Charles's jaw tightened. And if they do? Henriette's arms tightened around her child. Then know that every blow you plan to strike, my son will carry its weight. If you fight, fight to win. The words hung heavy in the air. In the distance, Hayes's whip cracked. Men flinched, but Charles did not look away from Henriette. He leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. Your son will inherit one of two things, he said. Chains or fire. The baby's cries softened, as though soothed not by song but by the rhythm of defiance. Night fell, and in the quarters the people ate their meager rations. Charles sat with Jacques, sharpening the knife hidden in his boot, its edge catching the glow of the fire. Henriette hummed softly in the background, her child's eyes half closed. The flames danced in their eyes, casting shadows on the walls. Chains rattled in the distance and the whispers grew bolder. The night was heavy with cicadas, their chorus stitched into the steady beat of drums from a far-off cabin. Fireflies blinked above the cane fields, tiny sparks in the dark, as though the land itself was practicing for a greater blaze. Inside one of the cabins, an old man tapped his cane against the dirt floor. Gabriel sat hunched, his leg twisted from years of field labor, yet his eyes gleamed with fire. His walking stick, carved with rough patterns, was more than wood. It was a chronicle of pain and defiance. Do you hear it? He asked, his voice graveled deep. Charles leaned in. Hear what? The silence. Before the storm. Haiti heard it too before the fire swallowed the master's whole. Gabriel's cane thudded once against the floor. Don't think the wind doesn't carry stories. Jacques frowned. Stories don't win wars. Gabriel's crooked smile cut through the gloom. No, but stories make men believe they can. Henriette, rocking her child nearby, hummed softly. Her eyes darted to Charles. And do you believe? Charles's hand brushed against his boot, feeling the knife. I believe chains break easier when the hand that grips them refuses to tremble. The old man leaned forward. Then you'll need more than fire. You'll need faith and men willing to bleed, and you'll need to know who will betray you before the first blow is struck. The door creaked open. A figure slipped inside, the glow from the fire catching the gold cross hanging at his neck. Pierre stepped forward, wiping sweat from his brow. His voice carried both weariness and a peculiar calm. You speak too loud, old man. These walls have ears, Jacques snorted. Better ears than lips like yours, Pierre. You've always been closer to the master's table than ours. Pierre's jaw clenched, his hand tightening around the cross. And because of that, I live to see another day. Better that than a noose. Charles studied him in silence. And yet you came here. Pierre met his eyes. Because the world outside is shifting. Haiti has lit a torch and its smoke drifts across the ocean. The masters are restless. They fear the cane will burn. But fear makes them dangerous. Henriette's voice cut through. And fear makes us stronger. Gabriel chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. The girl has more fire than the lot of you. Pierre sat down slowly, pulling at the chain around his neck. You speak of fire as though it saves. I've seen it consume. You raise your hand and the masters will answer with guns, dogs, and gallows. They will mount your heads along the river like trophies. Jacques slammed his fist into the table. Better to die with a blade in my hand than rot one more year in these fields. The cabin fell silent. Outside, the drums beat faster, echoing Jacques' anger. Pierre lowered his voice. And what of your families? Henrietta's child? Gabriel's daughter who still lives under Andrew's roof? Will you sacrifice them too? Henriette's lullaby stopped cold. The child stirred, whimpering. She held him tighter, eyes burning. Do not speak of sacrifice as if we haven't bled every day of our lives. My son will inherit one of two things, chains or fire. I have already chosen. Pierre looked away, the firelight glinting off his cross. Charles finally spoke, quiet but cutting. Every rebellion has its betrayer. The question is, which one of us will it be? The words lingered like smoke coiling into the rafters. Gabriel tapped his cane once more, sharp and final. "Mark this night. You have begun a path that cannot turn back. The river will run with either sugar or blood. Choose which it will be." The drums outside grew louder, urgent, alive. Jacques leaned closer to Charles, his scar catching the glow. "We're in it now." Charles nodded, eyes set, voice like steel. "Yes, and soon the fire will come." The morning sun broke through the cane like knives of gold, but there was no warmth in its light. The field was hushed, workers bent in rhythm, their machetes slicing through stalks. Every sound, the swish of cane, the grunt of labor, was swallowed by an unease that seemed to hang in the air. Samuel Hayes rode along the row, his whip coiled like a serpent in his hand. His horse snorted, hooves kicking mud. His eyes were narrow, searching for weakness. Then he saw it. A boy, no more than 12, crouched low, slipping a handful of raw sugar cane into his mouth. Hayes's voice cracked like thunder. "You thief!" The boy froze, sugar on his lips. His eyes darted, wild and terrified. He dropped the stalk, but it was too late. Hayes dismounted with a practiced grace, whip unraveling from his hand. "Stand," Hayes ordered. The boy's knees shook. He rose slowly, head bowed. "You take what isn't yours," Hayes said, circling. "And for that, you'll learn." The workers had stopped cutting. Jacques' fists clenched around his machete. Charles's jaw tightened, his eyes fixed. Henriette drew her child closer, her lullaby cut off mid-note. Hayes cracked the whip across the boy's back. A sharp cry split the morning air. The sound echoed down the rows, louder than the drums of any night. Again the whip fell. And again Eliza, watching from the edge with her basin, whispered under her breath, "Lord, have mercy." Charles stepped forward, but Jacques gripped his arm. "Not now," he hissed. "Not yet." Hayes paused, sweat beading on his forehead. The boy had collapsed, silent, motionless. Hayes prodded him with the whip's handle. No sound came. No movement. Hayes spat in the dirt. "Let this be your lesson." He turned back toward his horse, indifferent. The silence was thick, choking. Then Charles whispered, words so low only Jacques heard. "He didn't run. He didn't beg. Neither will we." The words struck Jacques like steel. His grip on the machete tightened. Henriette's eyes glistened, fury cutting through her fear. Gabriel leaned on his cane, whispering, "The river runs red, just as I warned." Hoofbeats thundered in the distance. A carriage rolled down the path, dust rising behind it. The workers parted instinctively as it came to a halt. From inside stepped Colonel Manuel Andre. He was dressed in a fine coat despite the heat, gloves white as bone. He adjusted them carefully, though faint stains of blood marred the leather. His hair was powdered, his boots polished. He carried himself as if the land itself bent to his will. Hayes bowed slightly. "Colonel." Andre's gaze swept over the field, pausing on the lifeless boy at his feet. "Another thief?" His voice was smooth, calculated. Hayes nodded. "Taken care of." Andre crouched, examining the boy with detached curiosity as though studying livestock. He stood again, dusting his gloves. "Good," he said softly. "Fear is cheaper than chains." The words slithered into the air. Workers dared not breathe. Andre turned toward the quarters, his eyes cold. "Double the watch tonight. Hades' fire may have burned far away, but I won't have it here." As he returned to his carriage, the workers exchanged glances heavy with unspoken rage. Henriette whispered fiercely to Charles, "You saw it. You heard him. There will be no mercy." Charles's voice was quiet but steady. "Then we will show them fire instead." The whip coiled in Hayes's hand again. The carriage wheels creaked away, and in the silence that followed, every soul in the field knew. Something had shifted. The cane swayed gently in the wind, as if bowing to what was coming. Night pressed heavy over the quarters. Torches burned low, smoke curling into the rafters, shadows stretching long across the packed earth floor. The people sat close, whispering, voices muffled as if the very walls might betray them. Charles stood in the center, the knife from his boot glinting in firelight. He set it on the table with deliberate care. "This," he said, voice low, "isn't enough. One blade won't win freedom. We'll need tools, weapons, fire." A man with arms thick as iron stepped forward, his hands still smelling of smoke and metal. Joseph the blacksmith placed a curved iron hook onto the table. "I've been fashioning these from plow parts," he said. His voice was deep, steady. They won't look like weapons until they're in our hands. Jacques tested the hook, swinging it once. Good. Cane for cane, blood for blood. From the far corner, a woman's needle flicked in the dim light. Marie-Claire's fingers were quick, precise, sewing small scraps of parchment into seams of shirts and skirts. She did not look up as she spoke. Letters, she murmured, carried on the body, hidden in the hem. No overseer thinks to search thread. Messages can move with the laundry. Eliza hummed softly, disguising her words inside the lullaby. The song carries farther than paper. The children sing it and the message spreads. Charles nodded. Every word counts. Every whisper counts. The door creaked. Heads turned sharply. A figure stepped inside. Mud clinging to his clothes. Scars carved across his arms like branches. His eyes burned with exhaustion but also defiance. Renee, the runaway who had returned. The room held its breath. Renee's voice rasped from days without water. I crossed the swamps. I saw the forts, and I saw what Haiti became. Gabriel leaned forward, gripping his cane. Tell it. Renee's eyes flicked to Charles. They said it couldn't be done there either. And yet the masters' heads rolled and the cane fields burned. Freedom doesn't wait for mercy. Freedom takes. Jacques grinned fiercely. Then so will we. But Pierre shifted uneasily, the gold cross glinting on his chest. And if we're caught? If the dogs find us before the fire spreads? You've seen what Andry does. He'll line the river with our bodies. He'll make crows feast on our heads. Renee spat into the fire. Better to be crow's meat than Cain's slave. The words struck like sparks. Suddenly a knock, sharp, insistent, shattered the tension. The room froze. Charles's hand went to his knife. Hayes's voice boomed from outside. Open up. The fire guttered low. No one moved. A long pause. Then Hayes's boots crunched against the dirt as he walked on, muttering curses. The cabin exhaled as one. Henriette pulled her child close, whispering the lullaby into his ear. Her voice was thin but steady. Sleep, little one. Sleep through the storm. Charles picked up his knife again. His eyes caught the flames. The storm is already here, he said. Now we decide if it belongs to us. The fire popped, sparks leaping into the dark. And for a moment it felt as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting. The night was thick with fog. The air tasted of iron and rain, though no storm had yet broken. In the cane fields, silence stretched, unnatural, deliberate, as if the land itself knew what was about to happen. Charles Delandes stood before his people. The knife gleamed in his hand, its edge catching the firelight from a single torch. Around him dozens gathered, Jacques with his machete, Henriette clutching her child to her chest, Renee crouched low with a sharpened cane blade, Joseph gripping the iron hooks he had forged in secret. He raised his voice, low but steady. Tonight no chains, the crowd murmured, the words rippling through them like a wave. Jacques lifted his weapon high. Tonight fire answers fire. The cheer rose raw and defiant. Feet stamped, fists pounded against chests. The earth seemed to shake beneath their unity. Henriette's voice cut through the noise. She sang the lullaby, but now it was no cradle song. It was a war cry wrapped in melody. Hush, little one, the night has come. And with it, fire. The sound steadied them. Charles's eyes narrowed. We move. They crossed the darkened fields, the torchlight bobbing like stars fallen to earth. Ahead the great house loomed, its windows glowing faintly with the warmth of lamps. The overseer, Mr. Andry, was inside, his table heavy with wine and meat. Renee whispered, "The door." "The back," Charles nodded. Jacques kicked it in. The room erupted, screams, shouts, the crash of overturned plates. Andry rose, pistol in hand, but Jacques was faster, knocking it aside with a blow that split the wood of the table. Henriette's child wailed as she held him close, watching as blood spilled across the master's floor. Andry's eyes blazed with rage. "You'll hang for this." "Every last one of you." Charles stepped forward, voice hard. "We've already hung for years." And with one strike, the old life ended. The fire spread quickly. Torches were thrown onto the sugar storehouse, flames devouring dry cane leaves like paper. Smoke rose into the night sky, a black column seen for miles. Joseph's iron hooks slashed chains loose from the storage shed, freeing men and women who stumbled into the night air, eyes wide with disbelief. "Run if you must," Charles called. "But if you stay, fight." Many stayed. Some picked up the iron hooks, others wielded machetes, pitchforks, or even shards of glass. Renee shouted, "To the river! We march to New Orleans!" The cry went up. To New Orleans! A thunder of voices rolling like storm surf. But not all voices joined. Pierre lingered near the edge of the field, the gold cross glinting against his chest. His lips moved in prayer. His eyes flicked toward the distant glow of another plantation house. And then, as the flames consumed the first estate, he slipped away into the dark. The march began. Dozens became hundreds as they moved downriver, striking plantation after plantation. Houses burned, whips fell silent, and men who had been beaten like animals raised their heads for the first time as equals. Jacques' laughter rang as he swung his blade. "Hear it? That's the sound of chains breaking," Eliza sang as she worked, her voice carrying over the chaos, summoning the enslaved from their quarters. The lullaby had become a summons, and with each verse, more joined the swelling crowd. Children clung to their mothers, old men hobbled along with canes, young men brandished weapons scavenged from overseers. It was no longer a gathering. It was an army. But in the distance, soldiers moved too. The militia, roused by warning, advanced with muskets and horses. At the head of their column rode François Trepanier, a planter with eyes as cold as steel. His orders were clear: crush the rebellion, make a spectacle, erase hope before it could take root. The two forces met near the swamplands. Charles lifted his hand. The rebels surged forward with cries of fury. Machetes clashed against bayonets, iron hooks tangled with muskets. The night filled with screams, the wet thud of bodies falling into mud. René tackled a soldier from his horse, driving his blade down again and again until the man no longer moved. Blood splattered his face, and he shouted, "This is what they fear." But musket fire cracked, sharp and merciless. Men fell. Women screamed. Jacques fought like a beast, his scarred face gleaming with sweat and blood. "Come on then," he roared, splitting a soldier's skull. "Come taste what you made us." Yet for every soldier that fell, two more appeared. Charles searched the chaos. Smoke and fire blurred his sight. Henrietta crouched with her child behind a cart, her face streaked with soot. Eliza sang even as bullets tore the night, her voice defiant against the thunder of guns. But then, Pierre's voice, urgent, breathless, speaking to Trepanier at the edge of the field. He's there. Charles, the driver. He leads them. Betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Charles's eyes locked with Pierre's across the battlefield. No words passed between them, but the silence screamed louder than musket fire. The soldiers closed in. The rebels scattered into swamp and cane, blood and smoke marking their path. Charles fought his way clear, his knife flashing, but a musket ball tore through his arm, spinning him into the mud. He rose, teeth clenched, blood soaking his sleeve. Jacques grabbed him. "We're not done yet." Charles spat blood. Not yet, but soon. They stumbled into the darkness, the fire behind them a roaring funeral pyre for what they had begun. By dawn, the cane fields smoldered. Dozens of rebels lay dead, their bodies twisted among the stalks. Soldiers patrolled the roads, dragging survivors in chains. Henriette clutched her child tight as she was hauled away, her lullaby silenced at last. René's body hung from a tree, a warning. Joseph's hands, once so steady at the forge, were broken. Charles, wounded but alive, was dragged before the militia. His knife was torn from him. Trepanier sneered. "You thought to be a general? You'll be a lesson instead." Charles lifted his head. His voice, hoarse but steady, carried over the silent field. "We lit the fire. Even if you drown it in blood, you'll never unburn what you saw tonight." The soldiers struck him down. The cane fields, once silent, now whispered only of smoke and ghosts. Morning came heavy with smoke. The sugar fields were black and stubble, the air thick with ash. Carrion birds circled overhead, their wings slicing the gray sky. Soldiers moved like shadows, muskets slung, eyes scanning for survivors. The rebellion was broken, but its echoes lingered in the smoldering ground. Charles de Londays was dragged before the makeshift tribunal. His shirt was torn, his arm bound crudely with blood-soaked cloth. He limped but did not bow. The militia gathered in a semicircle, their boots muddy, their eyes sharp with the satisfaction of victory. François Trepanier presided. His words fell cold. "You led them into fire. You will pay in fire." Charles's gaze swept the gathered crowd. Jacques shamed and battered, Henriette clutching her child, Eliza bruised but unbroken, René already gone, Joseph's hands mangled beyond repair. And among them Pierre standing apart, the golden cross glinting on his chest, untouched, unshackled. Charles' voice rasped. "It was not betrayal of me. It was betrayal of all who ever called you brother." Pierre's lips trembled, but he did not answer. The trials were no trials at all. Sentences were spoken like thunderclaps, swift and merciless. One by one, names were called. One by one, bodies were condemned. Jacques spat blood and laughed. "Go on, hang me." A rope's lighter than a whip. The soldiers beat him silent. Henrietta pleaded not for herself but for the child in her arms. "He knows nothing of fire or chains. Spare him." A soldier yanked the boy from her grasp. Trepannier's voice was flat. "The child will be given to the household. The woman disposed of." Henrietta screamed until her throat bled. The executions began at the edge of the cane field. Heads were taken, displayed on pikes driven deep into the soil. One by one, the rebels were marched forward, their bodies broken but their voices unshaken. Joseph, his hands destroyed, whispered to Charles as they passed, "They can break iron, but not fire." Charles nodded. Eliza was forced to her knees. Her song still lingered, trembling on her lips until the blade silenced it. Yet the lullaby did not vanish. It carried in the breath of those who heard it, in the trembling of the women watching. Jacques went last of the group that day. He stared at Trepanier with one eye swollen shut, his grin ragged. "When your sons hear of this, will you tell them you killed men? Or ghosts?" The axe fell. Charles was kept for last. Not to be killed, but to be broken. They whipped him until flesh tore, until blood soaked the earth. They severed his hands, his feet, leaving him crawling in the dirt like a wounded beast. Trepanier leaned close. "You wanted to be a general. Now you're a warning." Charles's eyes, dim with pain, still burned. His voice was barely a whisper. "You'll hang your victory on pikes, but we'll hang in memory that you can't kill." The soldiers silenced him with fire. His body was dragged, mutilated, burned, but his words lingered like smoke. The terror spread further than the flames ever had. Along the river road, over 90 heads were mounted on spikes, lining the path to New Orleans. Children cried at the sight. Women covered their eyes. Men forced themselves to look, because to look away was to forget. A planter muttered to another. They wanted to be free. See where it got them. But in the quarters behind closed doors, whispers passed like sparks. They fought. They rose. They lit the night. The lullaby returned, sung in hushed tones over children's beds. Not as comfort, but as memory. Pierre returned to his quarters, gold cross still shining, but his hands trembling. He told himself he had saved lives by ending the fight early, but the silence of his fellows was worse than any curse. No one spoke to him. No one looked at him. He was a man alone, condemned by the very chains he clung to. One night, he touched the cross and whispered, "Forgive me." But no answer came. Henrietta, sold away, carried the memory of fire in her eyes. She never saw her son again. She hummed the lullaby to herself, each note a blade of sorrow, each word a prayer for vengeance whispered to the night. Eliza's song was remembered by others, even if her voice was gone. In years to come, women would sing it with fire in their throats. René's body, left to rot, became a tale of terror told to children. Do not rise, or you will hang like René. Yet in whispers, his name meant defiance. Joseph, crippled, survived. He forged chains for masters, but in secret carved hidden marks into the iron, symbols only the enslaved could read. His hands could no longer fight, but his memory did. And Charles Deslandes, his death too brutal to be hidden, became more than a man. He became a story, retold at every fire, sung in every field. In New Orleans, officials congratulated themselves. The rebellion was crushed, order restored. The governor declared, "Let this be a lesson. The cane will grow, the sugar will flow, and the order of this land will not be shaken." But the order trembled anyway. Beneath the soil, something smoldered. Not fire this time, but memory. At night, when soldiers patrolled the levee, they swore they heard voices. The cries of men cut down, the laughter of Jacques, the lullaby of Eliza. Ghosts, they muttered, uneasy in their saddles. For the living, grief cut deep, but deeper still was pride. For the first time, the enslaved had risen in numbers, had marched with weapons, had lit the plantations aflame. Even in defeat, they had shown that chains could bend, that whips could falter. The executions ended the rebellion, but they did not end the story, they began it. Years passed, but the scars of 1811 never healed. The cane grew back, tall and green, yet beneath it the soil remembered. Blood had seeped deep into its roots. When the wind moved through the field, some swore it carried voices, half scream, half song. In the quarters, mothers rocked their children to sleep with the same lullaby Eliza once sang. But the words were altered now. No longer a cradle song, it was a secret code, a memory of fire, a warning and a promise. Sleep now, but wake fierce when the time comes. Henriette, far from her child, whispered the tune each night until her last breath. Her son, raised in another house, never knew her face, but neighbors would say they heard him hum a song no one had taught him. Blood remembers. The heads on pikes rotted and fell, but their story sharpened with each retelling. For the planters, it was a tale of terror, proof of savagery, justification for iron-fisted control. They told their sons, remember the flames, remember the slaughter. This is what comes of mercy. But for the enslaved, it was something else entirely. Around fires and hushed voices, the story changed shape. They fought with knives. They marched like an army. They nearly took New Orleans. Details shifted, grew, exaggerated like shadows at dusk. Charles became taller than any man. Jacques could not be killed by bullets. René rose again each night to haunt the levees. Joseph's broken hands became sacred relics, whispered about as symbols of endurance. Eliza's song was said to summon courage itself. By the 1830s, the rebellion was legend. It traveled upriver and down, carried by sailors, whispered in French markets, smuggled into hymns sung in churches. Even those who had not seen the flames claimed to. A man might lean across a tavern table and mutter, "I knew Charles." His eyes were fire. The authorities tried to erase it. Records were sealed, names erased, sermons preached about loyalty and obedience. But words slipped through cracks in the walls, and memory proved more stubborn than any decree. The slaves who lived through it carried the tale in scars. Each lash, each brand, each wound became a sentence in the unwritten chronicle, and the children listened. In New Orleans, Creole musicians worked fragments of the lullaby into their songs, disguising rebellion in rhythm. Drums echoed the march of 1811. Flutes carried the tune of Eliza's voice, though few knew its origin. Even as masters sipped wine in ballrooms, the music of Revolt drifted through their parties. Some said that on certain nights, if you walked the river road where the heads once stood, you could hear footsteps in the cane. The clatter of chains, the strike of machetes, the cry of, "To New Orleans," echoing faintly against the levee. Ghost stories, the planters scoffed, but the fear never left their eyes. Pierre lived long enough to see the world change around him. He died with the golden cross still on his chest, but no one sang for him, no one wept at his grave. Children pointed at his name in whispers, the betrayer. He was remembered but not honored. Henriette's son, grown tall, became a man who refused to bow his head. He did not know why, but rage stirred in him whenever a whip cracked. He carried in his blood the fire of 1811, though he never knew its source. So it was for generations, the fire hidden, but never extinguished. By the time the Civil War erupted, the story of the Great Cane Revolt had passed fully into folklore. Soldiers marching south heard whispers of it from locals. Abolitionists in the north seized fragments of the tale, burning fields, men rising, chains shattered, and turned it into a rallying cry. Charles Deslandes became more than a man. He became a symbol, the one who lit the fire first. Jacques became the immortal warrior. René, the fallen martyr. Eliza, the voice of freedom. Henriette, the mother who lost but never surrendered. Joseph, the smith who left marks, even in chains. Their real faces blurred, but their legend sharpened. And still the cane field swayed, green as ever, hiding the ashes buried below. But those who bent to cut the stalks sometimes paused, staring at the horizon, feeling heat that was not the sun, hearing drums that no one beat. The past had not vanished. It walked beside them, a shadow taller than the cane. It whispered through lullabies. It burned in memory, and it waited. History remembers victories, but rebellions like 1811 rarely end in victory. They end in blood, in silence, in the cruel order of the lash restored. Yet something greater survives. The Great Cane Revolt was crushed. The rebels were beaten, mutilated, displayed as warnings. Their fire was drowned in smoke and ash. On the surface, nothing changed. Sugar still flowed, chains still tightened, whips still cracked. But beneath, something had shifted, because once a man has stood upright, once a woman has sung defiance with her last breath, once a child has seen fire tear through the night, there is no return to silence. Chains may bind flesh, but they cannot bind memory. The story of Charles Delonge and his companions became more than history. It became an inheritance. Each generation carried fragments of it forward, through songs, through whispers, through the very silence of those who had seen too much. And what does it tell us? That rebellion is not measured in victories, but in the courage to rise at all. That freedom, even if lost in the moment, burns brighter for having been seized, if only for a single night. That betrayal leaves scars, deeper than the whip, but loyalty can echo across centuries. The fields are green again. The cane sways as if nothing ever happened. But the soil remembers. The ghosts walk still. And when the wind rustles the stalks, it is hard not to hear the whisper of fire. Justice was not served in 1811. But justice does not die with its martyrs. It waits, like embers under ash, for hands brave enough to fan it into flame. The great cane revolt of 1811 was drowned in blood, but its fire never truly died. It flickered in lullabies, in ghost stories, in whispered names carried through generations. And now, 2 centuries later, we are the ones who must decide what it means. When you hear this story of men and women who rose knowing the cost, who faced muskets with machetes, who traded their lives for a single night of freedom, what stirs in you? Would you have remained in chains, bowed and silent, waiting for mercy that never came? Or would you have walked into the fire, blade in hand, voice unbroken, knowing the dawn might never be yours to see? History is not just what happened. It is what we choose to remember and what we choose to forget. And the memory of 1811 still asks a question. If you had stood in the cane fields that night, smoke choking, drums pounding, fire rising, would you forgive? Or would you burn it all down? You've been watching The Slave Resistance, where we uncover the hidden rebellions, the silenced voices, and the untold fires of history. If this story moved you, if it shook something in you, don't let it fade into silence. Subscribe to the channel. Like this video. Share your thoughts in the comments, because history is not just past, it is present, and it waits for us to remember. This was Fields in Flames, The Great Cane Revolt, 1811. The fire still burns.